Dream Team. It's your boy D Neal back with another reaction video, guys. Here we are with why Max Verstappen is a sim racing genius. I don't necessarily know what sim racing is. Before we jump in, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, ring notification bell, get a video a thumbs up so it gets suggested. If you guys have a favorite video suggestion, you can subscribe to Patreon, drop it in the comment section or in the description section as your premium request link. What we got next?
Not only is Max Verstappen the current F1 world champion, but he's one of the top 3 sim drivers in the world. And nobody has done that before, being right at the pinnacle of both sports. So in a world where being a pro sim driver is a full-time job, how does he do that and win the F1 World Drivers' Championship? Well, it's down to his specific technique. So, let's break it down. Look at this. This is Max driving at Bathurst, one of the most technically challenging circuits on the planet. And he is driving flat out, right up close to the walls, leaving zero margin and completely understanding his car. It's Max's qualifying lap at the iRacing Bathurst 12 hours last year. He's in the top tier, racing the best sim drivers and teams in the world. And he set a time 4.5 tenths faster than anyone else. 4.5 tenths is a lot in real world racing, where conditions are changing a lot, meaning that the track could be faster or a driver could get a tow and gain half a second. But in the sim, it's just each driver and the lap. Nobody else is on the circuit, and there are identical conditions. And so then 4.5 tenths of a second is a massive amount. Then there's this. It's the start of the Le Mans Virtual this year. He starts 4th and makes an incredible launch to be first before the first chicane. Then he just runs away with it, pulling out an enormous lead before the game crashed, but that's another story. He's racing pro esports drivers like James Baldwin, ex-F1 drivers like Romain Grosjean, F2 champion Felipe Drugovich, and other drivers who have won the real Le Mans 24 hours. And Max calmly drove away from them all. So, Max is in the sim a lot.
Max, you can't win everything, Max. God dang. Max, you gotta share. You can't have sim racing and F1. It just ain't fair, Max. But I get that's Max Verstappen, man. Driving is just in his blood. He's just greatness. Max is greatness personified. Like once in a generation type talent, man. But this is crazy. So sim racing is like esports. Like you got basketball, but then you got your esports basketball players. So it's kind of like a video game version of the sport. That's really cool. And Max is also amazing. What is he not incredible at, bro?
And Max calmly drove away from them all. So, Max is in the sim a lot, mainly iRacing, but he also plays on other platforms. iRacing is also my preferred sim. The cars feel real to me, and the way the tyres behave and the car moves feels pretty good. And I have to say, many other pro drivers agree with this as well. Now, you might be saying, why is this surprising? He's fast in the real world, of course, so he should be fast in the sim.
I was thinking, I mean, because you race in the real world, you're going to have a natural advantage in the sim, is what I would think. But explain it to me.
Well, that's not the case. The sim and the real world are very similar, but they're not the same, especially when it comes to the final few tenths of lap time. I've personally seen lots of very capable real world drivers struggle in the sim. These are drivers who are straight on the pace in the real world, but they spin off and hit every barrier in the sim. And it personally took me a while to adjust as well. When you jump in the sim, you're taking away senses that you've relied on for years. Your feel for G-force, hearing other drivers around you, your 3D perception of speed, the vibration you get with wheel spin, all of it gone. You have to adjust the in-game audio, which isn't quite as good, no G-force, and a 2D screen. Unless you use VR, of course, which has its own quirks that you have to get used to. There are some differences in the technique and the racing compared to the real world. There's your ability to feel the car. In the real world, you can feel a tyre slide, getting an idea for how much grip it has corner to corner, allowing you to adapt to changing conditions, tyre degradation, and feeling the balance change as the fuel burns off. You do have force feedback though through the steering wheel in the sim, and to be fair, it's excellent. But it's a hard task to exactly replicate what you feel with your backside in the seat of a real racing car. Interestingly, Max, like many top sim drivers, has a few little tricks to help. Listen to this. That grinding, rubbing noise is a tyre sound in iRacing. So Max turns the engine all the way down and the tyres all the way up. and this is his way of knowing when the tyres are close to their limit. Rather than feeling it like in a real race car, he also listens to it in iRacing. So many of the top sim drivers have learned on the sim and haven't raced at a high level in the real world. They've learned to drive quickly in the sim using fewer sensors, meaning you can often put them in a real car and they can learn to be quick.
It's very different between a real driver and a sim driver. You need to drive a lot more in real life to overcome that little kind of, it's not fear I think, but it's a bit of trust in the car as well. So I do think that, you know, if you give a sim driver a lot of track time as well, I think, yeah, they can get very competitive, but you need to give them the opportunity to be able to do that.
However, Max...
I feel that makes sense, and that's what they did in this. I haven't seen it yet, but I really want to see it. What is it called? Turismo? The new movie, where the guy went from like racing on a game to actually racing in real life and became a champion. And I really want to watch it. But that's kind of like, so kind of like a situation like that, I would assume. This is just really cool, bro. Like, I really want to get into like racing games. And I don't know sim racing, but I know like F1 23. And then maybe see how I feel about that and kind of build off of it. But yeah, I want to get into racing games. But that steering wheel and pedals, man, that's expensive. And I don't want to play with my controller. Like, I want to actually drive. But Jesus, it's expensive. So we'll see if I do or not in the future. But this is really cool.
Get very competitive, but you need to give them the opportunity to be able to do that.
However, Max is coming the other way, and there are so many other drivers. Lando Norris, Rubens Barrichello, Fernando Alonso, Bruno Spengler, Romain Grosjean, the list goes on. Even our producer Callum here at Driver 61 has raced Valentino Rossi and Fernando Alonso on iRacing. He lost, of course, but still, Max won the USGP this year at the Circuit of the Americas and was seen in iRacing lobbies just 3 hours later. But what's really interesting is that Max drives similarly in the sim to in the real world. He's super aggressive, and that's not a bad thing. Just look at this. In the iRacing Petit Le Mans, he sent some real dive bombs, as well as running people wide in typical Max fashion. His approach to racing here is the same as in the real world. And look at this move. It's the start of the Le Mans Virtual. There's a driver on the inside on the way into the chicane, which becomes the outside for the second part. Max gets his nose just ahead and runs wide to the outside, bumping into the other driver a little. He forces other drivers to back out, similar to his real-world driving. And you can say what you like about this, but it is within the rules. And in this case, Max didn't get a penalty. And that's what great competitors do, push right up to the limit of the rules. In terms of driving, there is another similarity. Max leaves absolutely no margin, always using every millimetre of the track and going for bold overtakes. And on occasion, it has caught him out. Last year at the Le Mans Virtual, he crashed out. He was taking a lot of curb at the Ford chicanes. So much so that a game glitch meant the car bounced up and spat him in the barrier. Then there was the Spa 6 Hour. Max was in an LMP2 car overtaking a GTE. He tried to go around the outside at Eau Rouge, which is always a risky move. He made the GT take a slightly unusual line, meaning it understeered very slightly. The two came together and it put Max in the barrier. There's no doubt he races to win, but that can catch you out every so often. Right, so the mentality is the same. The specifics of the environment and the senses you have are different. So what does that do to Max's driving style? Well, Max's teammate Atsa Kirchhoff at Team Redline said this.
What makes Max very strong is that he's very dynamic in his driving. So he can drive an impossible car and still send it over the limit. You don't have to tell him to work hard because it's his nature. Like, he will push as hard as he can to make sure that he gets the maximum out of the car.
And that's also what the best...
That's so freaking dope, bro. This just hypes me up, bro. Max is awesome, man. Max Verstappen is just awesome, bro. Is there not... for lack of a better word, he's just awesome. Simple and plain. This sim racing is really cool. Man, I think that's something I would enjoy so much. I think I would enjoy it so much.
He can to make sure that he gets the maximum out of the car.
And that's also what the best drivers have. The ability to drive anything to its limit. The ability to adapt to the car and do it very quickly. In the real world, you have very limited testing or practice time. So even if the car is a pig to drive, you need to adapt your own driving style to get the most out of it. And that brings in another interesting side note. In the sim, Max isn't driving a Red Bull F1 car. He's driving GT cars, LMP2 cars, F3 cars, and they all require different driving styles, particularly the GTs. In this case, they're heavier, they have less downforce, and they have things like traction control and ABS. And of course, you have to drive this type of car very differently to a Formula car. For example, in a Formula car or something with a lot of downforce, at the start of the braking zone, you brake very, very hard and quickly trail off the brakes as the downforce comes off the car. Because as the downforce comes off the car, you have less grip. And so if you kept your foot hard on the brakes, the tyres would lock up. Whereas in a GT car with ABS, you often brake at a constant 80 to 90% pressure before trailing off as you move into the corner. And this allows you to get the most out of the ABS braking. It's very, very different.
I'm not racing a Formula 1 car on the simulator, but it's like GT cars, so it's also a different technique of driving. So I just keep testing myself, and especially, you know, these sim drivers, they're so quick. You know, it's very interesting to see them drive because they have no real experience of a car. But somehow, when you look at how they're braking, how they're going throttle, it is how it should be.
The only thing I wanted to know from this was how does Verstappen's driving style compare from the sim to the real world? Well, I've sat and analysed a lot of footage of Max racing in both situations. And there are some differences, but mainly similarities. Let me explain. The main thing is that Max is rarely driving F1 cars in the sim, so that does change the specifics of his technique. These past few generations of cars have forced the drivers to be very smooth when driving. I actually went to the Turkish Grand Prix a few years ago, and at turn 1 you could really see how smooth the drivers were coming off the brakes, pitching the car into the corner and then getting on the throttle. And the fast drivers were super smooth. When you're driving in the car, it feels like one fluid movement, from braking to turning to acceleration. All of these inputs are blended together. So Max will be adjusting his technique to suit. So when he's in a GT car or an LMP2 car in the sim, he adjusts to those as well. But the fundamentals are the same. Max uses all of the road and focuses on the exit of the corner. And this is where he's a lot faster than a lot of the pro drivers. Not to say that he's slow on the entry to the corner, but his time is gained on the exit. And then there is the case of setup. Remember F1 in 2022. At the start of the year, the Red Bull was pretty understeery, meaning that the front of the car was lazy to get into the corner and pushed on the exit. This suited his teammate Sergio Perez, but meant that Max struggled.
Yeah, well, it's fair. My boy went down celebrating.
Pushed on the exit. This suited his teammate Sergio Perez, but meant that Max struggled. He likes a very pointy car, one that wants to turn in easily and rotate in the corner. And this is the same in the real world and the sim. It also explains why Max likes mid-engine GT3 cars like the Audi rather than front-engine cars like the BMW. The mid-engine means he can rotate them better through the corner. Anyway, many drivers can struggle with a pointy car. It's very easy to lose the rear on the way into the corner when a lot of the load is going through the front tyres. So you have to have an incredible feel and be very delicate with your inputs. And Max is incredible at this. He uses his fantastic feel to predict where the car is going to slide and just stay below the limit. And if it does slide, he can control it with very subtle inputs, counter-steering or coming up off the brakes very slightly, which tends to reduce rotation in the car. So if he can deal with the oversteer, this means he can rotate the car more than the other drivers and not pick up any understeer on the exit. Now, remember what I said about maximizing exits. It's this pointy setup that allows him to do this. With a car that wants to rotate, Max can rotate the car further through the corner, meaning he can carry more speed out of it. Just look at this. The white car is James Baldwin, a really fast sim driver. The black car is Max, and Max carries loads of speed out of the corner. He did the same thing with that epic lap at Bathurst. Combine that with incredible commitment and complete understanding of the car, and he makes one complete sim driver. You should check out these videos here. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.
That's so cool, bro. That's legit so dope. Yeah, I wanna to be great. I mean, you would think that driving does give you some kind of advantage, but like you said, there's people who've never like driven professionally before, and they're absolutely just so fast. That's all we got. You guys got a favorite video suggestion? You can subscribe to Patreon and drop it in the comment section. It's your boy Neal. Out.